What if burnout isn't something to fix, but a sign you're meant for a career transition? Find out how right now. Welcome to the Midlife Reinvention Podcast, a podcast helping women in career and life transitions achieve clarity on their next steps so they can transform uncertainty into an energizing next chapter. I'm your host, Kavita Ahuja, and the founder of It's My Time Now Coaching. If you're wondering what's next in your career or life, you are in the right place. Through solo and guest episodes, you'll gain practical tips, tools, and inspiration to help you uncover blocks, gain confidence, and be, do, and have what you want. I rediscovered myself after the age of 50, and I know you can too. It's my time now to help you do just that. I'm so excited you're here. Let's dive in. Have you ever hit a point in your career where you just thought, how did I end up here? In today's episode of the Midlife Reinvention Podcast, I'm joined by Michelle Casaza, who shares her story of corporate burnout, spiritual awakening, and how she used nature and intuition to find her way back to balance and Ikigai. In this episode, you'll discover how to recognize the real signs of burnout and why it's often more emotional than physical, the role of intuition and micro decisions in making sustainable career and life transitions, and what it means to live your Ikigai and how to start uncovering yours today. Continue listening to discover how burnout might be your greatest teacher and your guide to powerful reinvention. Welcome to the Midlife Reinvention Podcast, a career and life transitions podcast. If you're asking yourself, what's next? You are in the right place. I interview incredible women across the globe for this podcast who share their stories of reinvention and who will give you their insights and expertise on how to rediscover who you really are, what you really want, and how to get there in your next stage of life. This week, I'm thrilled to have on the show Michelle Casaza. Michelle is an executive and transformational coach, empowering women to ignite their own inner source of power and live fulfilled and aligned lives. A former corporate executive, Michelle navigated from burnout, depression, and corporate trauma to living a soul-aligned life. She left her corporate career and sailed 5,000 nautical miles to discover what truly enables sustainable success. Today, through her work at Matria, she helps organizations create environments where women thrive and coaches executives to build lasting and fulfilling careers. So I am really happy to have you on the show today. Michelle, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Kavita. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, it's my pleasure. You were a former executive, corporate executive. I led successful IPOs. I worked 3 continents, and you were in executive leadership roles in finance and in tech and operations. So now you are the founder of your organization called Matria. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that. But also in doing that, we talk about transitions here. We talk about reinvention. So what led to this transition in your career? And just please share your reinvention story with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you hinted at it in the intro. I reached a real low point in my career and knew things had to change. But on my way to that low point, there were some signs. And there was a really big one that I shared with you last week that really changed the course of my life. And it was early on in the COVID days when we were working from home on Zoom all day. And it was to the point where I was waking up in the morning, just dreading everything on my calendar. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, why is this the life I'm living? How did I get here? And I was sitting on a Zoom call, kind of zoning out. And all of a sudden I heard the word balance. It was spoken to me. Zoom was over here on my right. The word came to me from the left, and I looked over and thought, who's in my apartment? Tell me more. Well, unfortunately, all I got was that one word. And I truly believe it was a calling from my spirit guide to say, you need to make a change. It's time to make a change and find what balance means to you. And I knew instantly that it wasn't the common phrase of work-life balance because I had been trying for years to figure out work-life balance and I never did. And so I really lived with this question for the next few months of what does balance mean to me? And a few months into that questioning, I decided that I needed to anchor into something. What I was going to anchor into was this idea that balance meant aligning my time with things that I loved, right? I was previously waking up, disliking everything on my calendar, like really just cringing over it. And I thought, okay, how can I start to bring more of what I love into my life? And of course, then you have to start thinking, well, what do I actually love?
What do you love? Yeah, exactly.
Happy, what brings me joy?
Yeah.
And I landed on a very simple list. I love sailing, I love travel, and I love good food. Those are really my three. And I had been following a company called Sailing Collective for a little while. And by a little while, I mean for 8 years. I was following them on Instagram, always looking at their trips and being really inspired. They would go on these week-long voyages in beautiful places around the world. And they would bring along these wonderful chefs. So it was like sailing tick, travel tick, food tick.
Tick.
And
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so I reached out to them and I started to sail with them during COVID. They had to cancel all their trips. They sailed locally in New York Harbor, which is where I live. And I jumped on board with them for a season. And very slowly but surely, I started to shift more into things that I love. And long story short, that was the start of a bigger transformation where I left my job and I started to actually work with this company. And over time, created Maitreya and stepped into my purpose. So I glazed over a lot, but that was really the high level story of getting from a place of depression, of burnout, of unhappiness to a place that felt so aligned and so lit up, so expansive.
Mm-hmm. Wow, wonderful. I think that's so interesting firstly too, when you're on that Zoom call and you heard that word balance. And the key thing here is, Michelle, is you actually listened to that, right? Because many of us probably have these little signals and these little voices. And often we just kind of ignore them or we just say, oh, well, whatever, I don't know what that means. But I think it's really important for the listeners to understand that if you actually listen and pay heed to those voices, whether it's your source, what you believe in, it guides you in life, right? And your question is about what balance means to you led you on this journey of aligning what you're doing with your passions and what you love. And that is completely, I believe in that because this is what I espouse. It's like you have to live your Ikigai, your passions. What is a combination of all of that that's going to guide you in life? So I love that, shifting more into things you love. So thank you for sharing that. You shifted. That's quite a drastic shift, right? So when you were going through that, and I kind of relate to that because I made a drastic shift in my career as well. But when we're going through these changes or transitions in our lives, and I'm sure you do as I did, we can face fears. We all face fears, right? And so maybe you can, when you were thinking about leaving your, I'm sure, very successful, comfortable position in your work, what type of fears did you kind of face and experience? And secondly, I guess, how did you develop the courage to say, okay, well, I'm going to go sailing for a year?
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Oh, they're such good questions because anytime you're making a change like this, anytime you have that whisper that you need to make a change in your life, there's so much fear that comes up, right? And even when you get that guidance, right? The intuition may come about the fear, right? That word balance didn't come with fear. That word balance came with oh, there's a moment of clarity. I need balance, right? It's after you get that hit that the fear comes in. It starts to work in overdrive. Our conditioning steps in. I dealt with a lot of fears. I dealt with the fear that I was going to mess up my life, right? Am I going to blow this all up? Am I going to do something quote unquote wrong here? And I sat with that for a while, right? Because I had been on this path for a very long time. I went to college, I went to business school, I did my career as you're meant to, started at a big company, went in house, did all these big projects. And now I was just going to step away. Right. And like
Mhm.
working culture will instill the fear of God in you about having a break in your resume. Like, God forbid you take time off, you go off track, you take care of a family member, you have a child. Like, how are you going to explain that to someone? Oh, okay. Right. And I just kept coming back to this idea that I was meant for something more. Whatever I was doing in my life was not what I was here to do as a person, as a soul, as a human. I was meant for more. And so I was weighing these ideas, the fear of messing up, the fear of going off track, with this inner knowing that I wasn't even on the right track.
Yeah.
I was like in the wrong ballpark, trying to hit a home run in the wrong ballpark. So
Yeah.
both of those voices existed. And I always feel that when you have fear with excitement, you're onto something. And I started to feel more and more excited about this new path and more lit up. And while there were some big moments and big decisions, right? Like the decision to send in my resignation letter and officially leave the job. That was a big change. But following that, there were a number of small changes that looking back were realigning me with my real path, my more
Mhm.
aligned path, that over time looked like a drastic change, right? I didn't quit my job and say, I'm going to go sail for a year.
Right.
I quit my job and I said, how can I incorporate sailing more into my life? Right. So first I started with lessons, then I started with a trip, then I started with part-time work, and then it turned into full-time work. And in that time, it was like this shedding, a slow shedding of all of the things that weren't mine while I was allowing myself to unearth who I really was. So Oprah says, life will whisper at you until you don't listen, then you're going to get a thud.
Yeah.
Right. And so I see that listening to that calling for balance, that was a whisper and I listened. I didn't make drastic changes. Like I said, it took me a few months to decide to leave the job and to make some of these changes. But I allowed myself to listen to those whispers.
Hmm.
The thud is when something more intense happens, right? Like you fall down a flight of stairs, which happened to me at some point in my journey, or you get into an accident, or you get sick, right? Like those are thuds. Your life has to stop to take care of this issue, right? And
Hmm.
it's like because we missed some of the whispers. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Reminds me of a lot of women who come to me or who come to you, I'm sure, who are listening, they maybe have this whisper or this whisper that you had, that I had, and the fear stops them in their tracks. And that's what I was getting at, and that's what you answered so eloquently is we can listen to the fears and do something about it, or we can ignore them and keep ourselves in the same comfort zone that we're used to, right?
Yeah.
And I love that because I think a lot of the fear comes from, oh, I have to give up everything all at once. And what am I going to do? What's going to happen? And what, like, I'm going to go do something wrong. And like your fear was, right? And I so encourage that is that it does not have to be so drastic. Transitions that you're going through, other than the ones that big ones, like if you're making a change in your life and in your next stage, you can take the time to figure it out and do it slowly and do it, methodically and thoughtfully. You don't have to like give up everything because that could get you really, that is scary. So if you do it kind of methodically and listening to like signals, like the world will give you the signals. People will come into your life. Situations will come and if you listen to them, if you allow yourself to listen to them, then the path will be lit up in front of you, right? So
There's so much coming up on this topic because I think this is an area that a lot of people get stuck in,
mhm,
right? Have
mhm,
this calling or this idea or this vision, and then you sink back into well, why me? Or how could this even work? Or I can't even imagine how to get from where I am today to that vision that I hold. And I hear a lot of this comparison going on as well, which is we see other people who have made the transition,
mhm.
right? And they seem to have it all figured out. And you're like, oh my God, overnight, this person changed, right? How do I change overnight? And I always say, nobody changes overnight. right?
No.
Working with a coach for a day is not going to change your life.
Yeah.
Sustained change, the small decisions that compound over time, it's realigning your time, your resources, your headspace, how you talk to yourself, right? There's so many things that have to change over time. When then suddenly the person emerges and they seem like they've changed overnight, right? But really they've been going through this transformation. And so I often encourage women that I work with who are considering these changes to give themselves the gift of time mentally,
Mhm.
knowing that it's going to happen, right? So for a long time, everyone was quitting their jobs, right? The economy was such that you could just quit your job, figure something out, get a new job, right? Now it's not so much like that. And I actually think that is a good thing because it's encouraging people to stay in their position. And when you stay in your role with the perspective of using it as a tool to help you make a shift, it
Yes.
really helps you in that transition. Like you're saying, being more mindful or thoughtful, strategic about how to get from point A to point
Yes.
B.
Yes. Yes. It's so
Yeah,
interesting. I'm just working with a client right now who's saying, I need a transition plan because I wanted like just slow down, slow down. It'll all work. It'll all work out. And I think that going back to the courage piece, once you take those little steps, that gives you the courage to move on. I wanted to kind of switch a little bit, and I was really fascinated by your sailing and water and how this and how this transition led you to the water and you've said it sailing is a metaphor for growth. So tell us about that, and it was just curious as how that kind of came about. What do you mean by that?
well, it's a good segue because we've been talking about fear. And for me, sailing has been a journey of facing my fears on the water and growing through that, right? Building the muscle, how to say, okay, I'm scared of this and I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to build
Mm-hmm.
the doing. So I sailed growing up a little bit with my family. It was a really interesting dynamic where my mom was afraid of the water and my dad was a self-taught sailor. And so when the boat, it was like, don't fall off the boat, don't get hurt, right? Like don't fall in the water. So it was very much like a fear-based experience for me. We were always like scared something was going to happen. And when I took on sailing for myself, which really happened during the COVID years, I was inspired by one of the captains I sailed with who just came on board and was completely at ease, right? And he just was calm, which led us to be calm, which allowed us to look around and enjoy the water. We were sailing here in New York Harbor, so we got to see the city from a new perspective. And it was then that I really felt like this is so magical,
Mm-hmm.
right? I was working, this was back in the days when I was working from home on Zoom, really having a hard time. And I would escape into the city during COVID to go sailing. And I just physically felt this huge release. After being on the water for 3 hours, I wasn't on my phone. I was in nature. I was literally on the water during that time, in the elements, in the wind, looking at the sky, enjoying the sunset. And I just felt so calm, really felt calm. And so it was through that I started to understand that sailing was allowing me to be present. And so I started to seek out more opportunities to sail because I was craving presence. It led me to a really transformative trip where I was crew to help sail a boat from the islands up to Newport, Rhode Island, which was a 10-day voyage. But we had no service for 10 days. And I would get seasick if I would read a book.
Yeah.
And so my form of entertainment was looking at the water and watching the waves. And I just sat there for hours looking at the wave patterns and being in nature and being present with myself, with the few people who were on board. And I came home from that trip and I felt like I had been healed. So
Mm-hmm.
this was about a year after leaving my corporate job. I felt a physical release. I felt a creative stirring. And it was this incredible opportunity for me to reflect and realize that that experience in corporate had taken such a toll on me. And that I needed this time to come back to who I was and to really learn about what was important to me and how I can live a more aligned existence. but sailing has been such an experience of learning and growing and not just personally, but I've learned lessons that I apply in business on the water. I tell people all the time, I tell clients all the time, have a hobby that you are so obsessed with
Hmm.
that allows you to be present outside of your job.
Yes. Yeah. I think the two things that came out for me, thank you for sharing that. It's wonderful. It's amazing. Is being in the present moment. And I just kept on hearing the word, like, I just feel like you were in flow. That sounds like that's the thing. If we find something in our lives that lets us be so present, that lets us go in, be in that flow moment, it just takes over everything and it just moves you forward. And so I think people who are able to do that and tap into that are very fortunate. I think we are all able to do that if we really take the time, like you said, to do that. But sometimes when we're out of flow, and you experienced this before your transition, is a lot of, and it's very real, is this burnout, right? And trauma from corporate trauma, you call it. And so that is a very real thing that people are experiencing. A lot of people, especially now, I think there's so much negativity in the world. So do you ever recover from this, and what is it? And what would you, I know that's probably a very big question. So maybe just some highlights in terms of how people who are experiencing burnout, what would you advise them? Like I know you kind of mentioned find something that you passion. What are
Right.
some other things if people are really burnt out right now or really feeling stressed? What could
Right.
they do?
Well, it's such a good question because when people are burned out or they're working really hard or they're stressed, we're all programmed to go sit on the couch and turn on the TV, right? Put on Netflix, zone out. Put on a video game, zone out. That's not going to revitalize us. It's not going to restore our energy, which is really what burnout is. Burnout is our energy is depleted and we're not filling up our cup, right? So don't turn on Netflix. We need to get outside, get in nature, right? We don't heal from burnout by doing nothing. We heal from burnout by being active in nature. Go on a walk, go on a hike, right? Plan a trip where you are just physically active in nature. You're using your hands, you're building something, you're being creative. These are things that allow us to heal from burnout because we get all the wonderful benefits of being in nature, which literally help rewire our brain and help our body move into the rest and digest system, which is the opposite of burnout. We're in fight or flight for too long and our cortisol levels are really high. So nature helps us shift naturally into rest and digest, helps us reduce stress. It improves our hormonal balance. So however you can experience nature, and this is something that you don't need to get on a plane to do this. If you're literally having a stressful day, you can go outside and look at the sky. You can go outside and look at the trees. Whatever nature you have around you, just notice it. Show gratitude for it, right? That's nature in small doses. Big doses is going out to sea for 10 days and staring at the water for hours at end, which if you can do that, please do. It's very enjoyable. But you don't have to. My point is that it doesn't have to be so drastic, right? So incorporate nature, do a Saturday hike. And when it's challenging because when you are so burnt out, you don't want to do these things. You want to be on the couch. You want to order a pizza and stay under the covers. I've been there, right? I was that person for a long time. And it was such a gift for me to have discovered this sailing because when you start to feel what it feels like in your body to be in nature and to be present, you start to crave more of that, right? Rather than craving that time under the covers, you crave that time in nature. So ask yourself, how could I experience more nature today?
I love that. That just brings to mind when we're in this feeling, when we're feeling these things, we're under stress, we're in burnout, and these emotions, like it brings a lot of what I refer to as catabolic energy. So it's really a breaking down energy where it just gets into this cycle. You get just worse and worse. Like you may feel good and initially, I have a glass of wine and watch Netflix, but then the next day you feel worse, and then it just all comes back. Whereas if you are resting and digesting, I love that term, and reach out and whatever it is, go for a walk, breathe, do some meditation, be in nature.
Yes.
Take some time, even if it's 5 minutes in between stressful meetings or whatever. that creates a lot of this anabolic energy, which is the building up force of energy. And that creates opportunities and that reduces stress. So
Yes.
all great, all great points, because burnout can just, it can start, but it can go into this vicious cycle unless you really address it right from right when it starts, or even realize or acknowledge that it's happening to you.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that you said that, because there's so many contributing factors to burnout, right? It's not typically that you're just working too much, because if you're doing something that you love with people who align with your values that light you up, you're going to feel energized. It's going to give you energy, right? And yes, you may be physically tired. You may need to take a nap, but you're not going to reach a state of burnout, which is really a state where you don't have the energy to show up anymore, right? And your body starts to break down and your mind is weak. And that tends to happen when all of the puzzle pieces aren't in place. So you're at odds with the people that you're working with. Maybe there's not an argument, but there's some value misalignment. So there's tension in how you work. Maybe you're in an industry that doesn't align with your values, right? And so that creates friction. Maybe you're working with someone who is breaking you down and tearing down your confidence, or requiring that you work in ways that are counter to who you truly are. So you're putting on a mask every day, right?
Yes.
And you're exhausted by trying to be someone that you're not, right? You're trying. Guess what? Trying is exhausting, right? It's literally exhausting. And I know we, especially as women, try to fit into environments that aren't built for us and that don't value our inherent strengths, our true power, right? And so we try to show up differently, and we're successful at it and we can get things done, but then we lose who we truly are. And we can't wear a mask all the time. At some point, the mask has to come off. And so my first response to how do you deal with burnout is get in nature, right? The second step is assess the situation that you're in. This is where support is really helpful, because if you're in this environment, I know I was there, it becomes the norm. So you stop wondering what it's supposed to be like, and you start accepting that this is what it is like work, or this is what a job is like, right? And so having an objective view on the situation can help you assess, am I in the right environment? Is this the right path for me? Right? Am I showing up to this environment in a way that's supporting me? And is the environment showing up to support me back? So there's a lot to unpack when someone comes to me in this situation. Like, first, we want to get you in a better place. We want to get you feeling more present, healthier, vibrant. And then we want to assess, is the situation the right situation for you?
Yes, absolutely. And that's so true. I mean, I think, yes, the initial thing about getting the energy back, but then you have to assess. And it kind of reminds me, you're talking about values and environment. Again, I go back to Ikigai. It's just like, okay, rediscover what are your really great strengths? What are you really good at? What do you really love? What are you passionate about? And what are you valuing, right? Are all those things aligned with what you're doing? And then if the other piece of it is the environment you're in conducive to that? Or is it going to make you thrive? Is the environment you're in going to help you thrive, or is it going to tear you down? Right. And if those things are not aligned, then I think that's the source of burnout and stress. Right. Yes. And so, yeah, it's so much to unpack there. I know you work with professional women in professional settings, and some of them, like the people I work with, are considering making a change. So tell me about that. And you also have a bit of an aspect about the divine feminine and the feminine leadership principles. So how does this kind of all relate to women in the corporate world? And
yeah,
another big question, I know, but
I know we could talk for hours.
I know.
Everything that I share is really to help women and the people that I serve build more sustainable success for themselves, right? So once you know who you are and what you want to do, how do we enable you to do that for the long term? And I believe there's 3 things that help build sustainable success. So I'll share those. And then I want to talk more about feminine leadership. The first is you have values alignment. So you know what your values are, and the people and company that you're working within share those values. Number two is that you're appropriately challenged in your work, right? The work is challenging to you, but not too challenging where it's impossible. It needs to be appropriately challenging. And that changes over time as your skill set grows. And so too needs your job to change and evolve. And the third piece is that your work is part of a balanced life. And the responsibility for that is on the individual. It's not on the company to give you balance. It's on you to create it. So building sustainable success is a key theme. Now, when I work with clients coming from corporate roles, which is primarily who I work with, right? We've been in male-dominated spaces. The corporate world is full of masculine energy. There's a lot of healing to be done to help women rediscover their feminine side. This was a big part of my journey as well. I was so in my masculine in my corporate career. My motto was get shit done. And you could give me a to-do list. First of all, I would create the to-do list. I would create the list and then I would run through it like you wouldn't believe. And my head was down and I was just going until I didn't even know where I was going to and why I was heading that direction. And so when I started to step away from that job and be more in the water, I discovered the divine feminine. And I started to understand that I was so disconnected from my own femininity and the strength and power that I hold in that part of my personality and that part of my being, that I was unbalanced. So coming back to that original calling, I know that part of that calling was saying, hey, Michelle, you're about to discover what the divine feminine and divine masculine means. You're out of balance. So I look at my corporate chapter as my masculine chapter, my sailing chapter as my feminine chapter. And guess what? Both of those were out of balance. I had to then come back and realign because we need both. We all have both energies, right? I'm not talking gender when I say divine masculine, divine feminine. These are energies within all of us. And yes, people who identify as women typically connect more with the feminine essence. And so true for the masculine side, but we all have both within us and we work best when individually we're in harmony and in relationship we're in harmony. And so as an individual, what does it mean to be in harmony with your masculine and your feminine side? Well, it means that on the feminine side, you're embodied, right? Our bodies are a huge source of knowledge, of intuition, of power. Are we connected to that? Are we listening to our bodies? Are we resting when we need rest? Are we moving when we need movement? Are we nourishing ourselves well, right? That then allows us to be connected more to our creativity, our intuition, our inner compasses, which helps us align with where we're meant to go. And that's all well and good. But if we stay in that space for too long, I always say, it's like laying on the couch being fed grapes. Like we can't just sit there all day and we're feminine, right? We need to take action.
Yes.
And that's where the masculine comes in, right? So we need a strong foundation. We need some structure. We need stability. We need that get stuff done energy because we do. Once we know what that creative vision is, we also need to put it into action, right? And so I work a lot with women to help us unpack that intense masculinity that so many of us live in because we're told that's what you have to do in the corporate world.
Yes.
Help that, uncover the feminine, and then harmonize the two on a path that feels more aligned. So to your point earlier about having a transition plan, but also like letting it go, it's going to happen. Yeah, both energies are needed. Right? We can't just walk into a transition with our hands up in the air and say, oh, I'll figure it out.
Yes, exactly.
Well, how are you going to pay your rent or your mortgage or buy?
Yeah.
Okay, we need to have a plan in place and we need to make space to listen to our intuition and allow things to happen for us.
Yeah.
So in my coaching, that's how I balance the masculine and the feminine, right?
Yes. I love the word and, because it's both. It's a complement. It's not, they shouldn't be fighting against one another. They should be complementing. The energies can be complementary, and it's a build up for us. Again, it'll talk about a little about energy. Now this feels like very anabolic, feels very, when you can tap in and yeah, like you said, I love that analogy with the grapes. You can't just fly there and expect things to happen. You gotta get shit done, right? So like you gotta do both. Like,
Wow.
yeah, but it's almost just like, it's like initially when you're in a transition or when you're starting out, there's a trigger, and then there's that period, and then the second phase of it is kind of the rediscovery. And I feel like that's where that feminine energy is, to really just rediscover yourself. And then the third phase is to actually implement what you have discovered in that second phase. And that implementation phase is where you can bring in the masculine energy. I never really thought of it that way. So thank you for that's enlightening me on that, because I actually never related it to that.
I want to tie it back to our question about burnout, because we talked a lot about trying.
Yes, please do. Yeah.
Trying to be what we're meant to be in the corporate world. And when we are out of balance energetically, and we are in the masculine as women, we are selling ourselves short, because we're not allowing our feminine powers to come through. And then I say feminine powered, it's like, ooh, what are these witchy powers? It's our intuition. It's our compassion. It's our empathy. It's being able to connect with people more deeply. It's seeing things that may not yet be in the data, but we know are happening, right?
Yes.
Being able to envision something and bring people along for that ride. So these are really incredible business skills. There's a reason why women are such amazing leaders and wonderful stewards of capital and incredible executives. There's also a reason why they're leaving the workplace. And so we can blame corporate America all we want, but we as individuals must first become responsible for how we're showing up in corporate America. And we have to balance this within ourselves, understand, yes, there's some incredible masculine energy that we're going to harness to drive us forward. And we're going to be connected to our feminine so that we can bring this unique skill set, this unique power and ability to create, connect, and really envision the future that we're building. When those two work in harmony, we are less likely to burn out, because we're no longer trying to be someone that we're not. We are showing up fully as ourselves. I used to hate that phrase, like show up, bring your whole self to work, right?
What does that mean?
I was hiding half of who I was. I was hiding my feminine side.
Yes.
I have to be. And so I burnt out and left. And so now with everything I do, I bring it all, right? I bring both sides, and I know that there's space for both. And not everyone's ready for that, but we are having this broader awakening of the feminine that when we create space for it, guess what? It's also going to create space for the masculine. It's going to rise both of us up, both men and women up.
Yes.
Right? We talk about toxic masculinity. Let's stop talking about that. Let's start talking about what divine masculinity looks like. What is the counter to the divine feminine? Well, it's the masculine energy. It's a man who is standing, able to create stability, consistency, hold space for that amazing creativity that women have. Men are creative too. This is not to say men are not creative, right? But it's the energetic side that we hold within us.
Yes.
So when we can create space for both, we allow both to rise. And that is what we need, not just in corporate America. That's what we need in our society. We need a space where women can show up fully as they are, as can men, and be celebrated for our unique and different strengths.
Drop the mic there. I should. No more questions. Wow. And I love this, because I think this is how these issues come up, is just by these conversations. And obviously I see how passionate you are about it, and it's wonderful. And I thank you for sharing that. And I think anyone listening can relate and will be like, yes, I'm bringing my whole self to my work. Yeah. As you said before, we could talk for hours. It has been a very, very enlightening conversation. And thank you so much for your wisdom and sharing your story as well. Michelle, it's been wonderful. I want to, before we end, please tell our listeners how they can find you, what you're
Yeah,
doing now, anything special you want to share. Please go ahead.
absolutely. So you can subscribe to my weekly newsletter at joinmatria.com/subscribe. And that is where you'll see weekly tips, inspiration, and little practices that you can put into place to help connect back to who you are. So definitely find me on my newsletter. And that's where I share all about my upcoming events and appearances and sailing retreats, which is something I'm really excited about. So getting women out of the office and on the water to connect, heal, and grow. Such a pleasure talking with you, and you're doing incredible work. So thank you so much for having me and all of the guests that you take time to interview on your podcast.
Well, thank you so much for everything, and good luck to you. And I would encourage anyone listening to please reach out to Michelle if you have any questions, and if you're interested in her work, please do seek her out. And thank you again. It was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
If anything in this conversation with Michelle hit home for you, feeling burnt out, questioning your path, or wondering if it's too late to make a change, I just want to say you're not alone. We talked about how burnout can sometimes be the first real sign that something's off, and how small, intentional steps towards the things that actually matter to you can make all the difference. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. You don't need to quit your job tomorrow, but if you've been asking yourself, what's next? You don't have to figure it out all on your own. That's exactly what I help women do. Get clear on what they really want and figure out how to move towards it in a way that works. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love to hear from you. Just reach out and send me a message at Kavita@itsmytimenowcoaching.com or head to my website, itsmytimenowcoaching.com, to get more information and to connect. Thank you for being here. And remember, there's always a way forward, even if you can't see the whole path yet.